Hi there, this is a lesson recording for the 3.09 U.S. History lesson, Nationalism, Culture, and Economy. Remember to start with going to lesson resources to get your reading guide and lesson answer key and any other necessary materials. The years from 1815 to 1824 are known in American history as the era of good feelings. Not all the feelings of the time were good, but there was relative calm, renewed growth, and a sense of optimism in the country. Primarily, this was a time when partisan politics took a back seat to political unity, and the United States moved forward with a new burst of nationalism. Learn what you can, and then translate that learning to capture the spirit of the times. Okay, goals for this lesson. Identify James Monroe and the terms last the Revolutionary War generation and era of good feelings. Describe economic opportunities and changes in the years after the War of 1812. Assess the political and moral issues that new opportunities for profit revealed after 1815, and list examples of ways in which a spirit of nationalism after the War of 1812 influenced the United States culturally and politically. Okay, just reminding you to get those lesson resources, and we're going to start with page 238 to 244. Okay, and we have just a timeline just to kind of showing you some of the events during this era of good feelings. So make sure you take a look at that. And let's start with the reading. Nationalism and economic growth. With bonfires and cannon blasts, Americans celebrated in the streets in 1815, marking the end of a second war against England, fought only 3 decades after the First War had ended. They had emerged from the bloody and costly War of 1812 with a new sense of themselves, jubilant that their fledgling republic had survived. With the same bravado with which they had declared "On to Canada" at the beginning of the war, Americans now celebrated the conflict's less than triumphant end, not 1 inch of territory ceded or lost. John Adams claimed that notwithstanding 1,000 faults and blunders, Madison administration had acquired more glory and established more union than all of his 3 predecessors, Washington, Adams, and Jefferson put together. Thomas Jefferson, while lamenting the tragic end of revolution in France, wrote to Lafayette that he felt confident of America's Republican future. "I do not believe there is on earth a government established on so immovable a basis." Across the Atlantic, European leaders were putting down revolutions and crushing the beginnings of democratic uprisings. Witnessing this, Americans came to believe even more firmly in their country's exceptionalism, that is, the idea of their unique status as a nation. Americans grew increasingly proud of their position as the lone democratic republic in a world dominated by autocrats. Monarchs once again ruled France, Spain, and most Italian states. In Russia, an all-powerful Tsar asserted his right to imprison revolutionaries. The Austrian emperor and Prussian prince clamped down on free speech. The so-called Holy Alliance of European monarchs, initiated by Russia, Austria, and Prussia, and including other European sovereigns, announced its intent to suppress democratic revolution wherever it appeared. Alone among the peoples emerging from 18th century revolutions, the United States had managed to survive as a self-governing nation. A wave of pride and democratic nationalism swept the young nation. Under Presidents Madison and Monroe, the new democratic nationalism expressed itself in a widespread belief that the possibilities for a free people with a hemisphere to itself, as Thomas Jefferson put it, were limitless. Yet even in this age of dynamic expansion, there were limits to America's unity and nationalism. Sharp political and economic divisions, especially between the slave South and the free labor North, continued to threaten the unity of the nation. Madison's nationalist platform. At the end of the War of 1812, in a spirit of renewal, American workmen set about making much-needed repairs to the nation's capital. They covered the smoke stains of the torched presidential mansion with white paint, as if to wipe away the dark memories of the past 3 years. Washingtonians began to refer to the restored presidential mansion as the White House. The charred, unfinished Capitol building also needed repair. Reflecting national pride, President Madison commissioned 2 new paintings for the rotunda depicting British defeats in the Revolution. In 1815, as Madison prepared for his annual message to Congress, he knew he would be speaking to an enthusiastic and optimistic group who had perhaps learned some lessons from the recently concluded war. National defense and economic growth. Both Jefferson and Madison came to the office of the presidency hoping to reduce the size of the Army and Navy. They intended to shrink the federal government, which had never been all that large, and leave the most power and decisions in the hands of state and local governments. But during the War of 1812, when President Madison fled the national capital in disguise just ahead of the British troops who burned it to the ground, he experienced the humiliating weakness of American defense firsthand. Victorious British officers suggested capturing the disgraced president and taking him back to England for a curiosity. When Madison emerged as a triumphant wartime leader, he changed course. He moved quickly to shore up what he saw as a nearly fatal weaknesses in the central government. In December 1815, in his 7th annual address to Congress, the president laid out an ambitious platform that called for many active federal programs. His biggest concern was national defense. Before the war, the military had been operating on a skeletal budget and staff. At the time, most Republicans then agreed that there was little need to support a large standing army since the United States seemed isolated from European wars. But the War of 1812 changed that. Now Madison argued the nation required a larger standing force, better coastal defenses, and a stronger navy. He called for further enlargement of the military academy at West Point and for creating additional military academies. In addition to calling for stronger national defense, Madison advocated increasing the federal government's role in promoting economic growth. Here's a building of new roads and canals that would forge a greater sense of unity between different parts of the country. His proposals included a protective tariff, a tax on imported goods, which would make American manufactured products cheaper and thus more competitive in both domestic and international markets. He also rechartered the Bank of the United States. By providing credit to state banks and businesses, the National Bank helped promote economic development by expanding the amount of money available for new and growing businesses. Old party lines disappear. Though it sailed through Congress to quick approval, there was irony in the Madisonian platform. In the recent past, Madison's Democratic-Republican Party had attacked Alexander Hamilton and the Federalists for their support of exactly the measures Madison now advocated. The heirs of the Jeffersonian tradition, including Madison, have viewed a powerful central government as undemocratic and a threat to liberty. But the war had changed Madison's thinking. With the introduction of his bold post-war plan, his party of limited government looked very much like the supposedly big government Federalists. Like his one-time political foes, Madison applied a broad construction of the Constitution. That is, he interpreted it in a way that gave the government a wider range of power than the Constitution explicitly specified. This political shift signaled the end of the party system of Federalists on one side and Democratic Republicans on the other. Significant political issues no longer divided the two parties. In the aftermath of the war, most leaders seemed to agree that the United States needed a stronger central government to ensure the nation's strength and unity. How could a few remaining Federalists oppose a president who now seemed to agree with them? And how could traditional Jeffersonian Republicans support policies that contributed to a more powerful national government? Amid such agreement, the old lines between Federalists and Republicans steadily disappeared. Without issues to divide them from the Democratic Republicans, the Federalist days as a coherent political organization were over. Popular culture, the Greek Revival. As Americans rejoiced in the survival of the Republic, their architecture reaffirmed their sense of the nation's special place in history. Ever since independence, Americans had evoked ancient Greece and Rome as sources of inspiration. Athens gave the world its first democracy and Rome its first republic. American buildings reflected that history. Thomas Jefferson's design for Monticello combined Greek and Roman themes. As nationalist sentiments swept the country, the architect Benjamin Latrobe included Greek elements in rebuilding the capital after the British invasion. In 1824, Latrobe's former pupil, William Strickland, designed Philadelphia's Second Bank of the United States to look like a famous Greek temple, the Parthenon. The structure, which according to Strickland had to be bomb-proof, consisted of 41,500 cubic feet of solid stone, 3 million bricks, and some 17 tons of copper. It was not only official government buildings that bore the stamp of ancient Greek culture. During this period of the so-called Greek Revival, new homeowners insisted that their front doors be framed by tall white Grecian columns. American women wore their hair in Greek-inspired ringlets and dressed themselves in gowns resembling the statues of Greek goddesses. Towns across the country received new names out of Greek history: Athens, Sparta, Ithaca, Troy. In the end, the Greek Revival was yet another affirmation of American democratic nationalism, affirming the new republic by invoking styles of the old. Monroe's era of good feelings. Continuing the unofficial two-term limit that George Washington had established 2 decades earlier, James Madison retired from public life after his second term ended in 1817. His successor, fellow Virginian James Monroe, entered office already a very popular man. Monroe, a Revolutionary War veteran, had earned widespread acclaim during the War of 1812 by personally leading a patrol to identify the position of the British Army prior to its invasion of Washington, D.C. Monroe was so respected that Madison had appointed him to serve simultaneously as Secretary of War and Secretary of State. As the hand-picked successor of a popular president, as a civilian war hero, Monroe won the election by a landslide. Indeed, the remaining Federalists were in such shambles that they failed to mount an organized challenge to the presidential contest. With most Republicans now solidly behind the Democratic-Republican Party and their new leader, Monroe embarked on a post-election goodwill tour of the country. During Monroe's travels, a Boston newspaper heralded the arrival of an era of good feelings, and the New York Haven Herald reported the demon of party for a time departed and gave place for a general burst of national feeling. With only the Democratic Republicans on the political field, a new era of unity appeared to be underway. As the last president of the Revolutionary War generation, James Monroe invoked memories of the nation's founding in his experience, dress, and manner. Present at Washington's crossing of the Delaware River on Christmas night, 1776, Monroe still bore the scars of a Hessian musket ball that nearly killed him. While most American men had long since given up their knee breeches, silk stockings, and powdered wigs, Monroe wore them as badges of honor. Yet, while firmly rooted in the past, Monroe also looked toward the future. The first president to deliver his inauguration speech outdoors, from the steps of the U.S. Capitol, he portrayed the United States as one great family with a common interest. Thousands of Americans were in attendance as Monroe took the oath of office. Their boisterous presence was a testament to the growing optimism that marked the age. An expanded electorate. Monroe's first term coincided with a new openness in American political life. Before 1812, most states restricted the vote to property-owning white men. Now, new states like Indiana, Illinois, and Alabama extended voting rights to all white men in hopes of attracting large numbers of settlers. Many older seaboard states, such as Connecticut and New York, felt compelled to follow suit, eliminating property requirements for the franchise. By mid-century, almost all white males could vote, and just notice here franchise here refers to the right to vote. As the electorate expanded, politicians became more eager to court the common voter. Congressman Henry Clay exaggerated his poor penniless childhood for political gain. He had inherited nothing from his father, he explained, except ignorance and indignance. The truth was more complicated. Clay's stepfather was a well-connected and prosperous planter who made certain that Henry received a first-rate legal education. But in the New Age, political leaders felt more pressure to appeal to the everyday voter. Candidates often referred to their humble upbringings in log cabins with dirt floors. They began to emphasize and glorify the spirit of the common man. The expanded electorate wanted more than the right to vote for someone like themselves. They wanted the opportunity to succeed. Some imagined making their fortunes in business, real estate speculation, or new manufacturing enterprises. But the majority of Americans were by far a mostly agricultural people who hoped to achieve economic independence by owning their own farms. For many at this time, there seemed to be limitless opportunity in all directions. Okay, we'll stop here in the textbook. Let's go back now. And it says complete the reading guide and complete the marketing and era activity. And here is the marketing and era activity. Your cousin has been working on a PhD and has just written a book about the era of good feelings. Unfortunately, your cousin has no idea to get it published. You have decided to help by creating an appealing flyer to include with a cover letter to potential publishers. Thankfully, your cousin will write the letter and has simply asked you to provide certain features in the flyer. Okay, so first you start by selecting the cover, and you might pick like the Greek and Roman architecture. Next. And then you just put in a title And like it just says, how you capture the spirit of nationalism and the complexity of the issues in just a few words. So this in all is an exercise just to get you to review the information you just read, go through the steps, and complete the marketing and era activity, and then be sure you complete the checkpoint at the end of the lesson. Best of luck to you.